Welcome to Who Cares, the podcast where we pull back the curtain on the people who care for others, the helpers, the healers, the protectors, and ask a question that often goes unspoken: who's caring for them? I'm your host, Dr. Wendy Selevitch. Today's guest has worn many uniforms, both literal and metaphorical. For nearly 3 decades, James Snow stood on the front lines of law enforcement, navigating some of the most harrowing moments imaginable. But beyond the badge, James is also a husband, a father, a grandfather, a mentor, and an artist. In this episode, we explore what it means to live a life of service, what it costs, and how we heal afterward. We talk about the weight of trauma, the quiet power of creativity, and the strength it takes to choose vulnerability over silence. This is a conversation about transformation, about the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding not just careers, but identities, and about the surprising places we find peace when we finally stop running from the noise. Stay with us. Welcome to Who Cares, the podcast that embarks on a profound journey into the heart of empathy and indifference in our modern era. Each episode of Who Cares brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests from various industries and walks of life. But Who Cares goes beyond individual stories. We dive into the larger societal and psychological undercurrents that have led to a perceived decline in collective empathy. Who Cares isn't just a podcast. It's a powerful call to action for reigniting the spirit of empathy within each of us. Let's find the answer to who cares together. Welcome to Who Cares. Well, I really appreciate you being here, and I'd like to start out with having you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what shaped you into someone who was called to serve.
Well, I grew up in Orange County, Fountain Valley, which for most people who have no idea where Fountain Valley is, it's right next to Huntington Beach. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows where Huntington Beach is. So grew up there, was adopted at birth, hit the cosmic lottery, two amazing parents that adopted me and I grew up with. So had 2 sisters, upper middle class, childhood, grew up riding my bike to the beach, surfing, I think probably what shaped me into who I am is probably my dad. Mm-hmm. Both my parents grew up poor, Midwest farmers, dad in Missouri, mom in Kansas. So from both of them, I think it was just, they were raised with a work ethic. Mm-hmm. That, if something needs to get done, you do it. Yeah. There's not, we pick up the phone and call someone to come fix something. If something was broken, dad fixed it. Car broke, dad fixed it. So, my earliest memories are, helping dad do things around the house. When I was a kid, we added a room onto the house. And so, I was out with him, at that age, you want to do everything your dad does. So, he added on the room to the house himself and was doing all the work. So, I was out there with him and, I kind of one of my earliest memories of, his saying that, has stuck with me my whole life, and I've tried to pass it on to kids that I've taught in the academies and stuff, is hard work wins. Mm. And, and that's one of my earliest memories of, doing things right and working hard is, as we were doing the addition on the house, I like pounded nails and putting siding on the house and, siding's going to go over what I'm doing. So I'm just, no big deal. It's just the plywood. And as I'm bending over, hitting nails, I'm bending them all. And I'm just keep moving on, but they're all bent. And my dad came out and said, hey, you need to remove every one of those. Wow. And do it right. And I was like, well, no one's going to see it. Yeah. The siding's going to be over it. No one's ever going to see those bent nails. And he said, it doesn't matter. You're going to know that they were bent. Yeah. And that you didn't do it right. Wow. So you need to go back and do it right. And that kind of memory has stuck with me my whole life. And that's kind of the, where that whole, hard work, if you want something, you go out and get it. Yeah. And, the service-wise, I don't know where that comes from. Like I said,
Was that something that was important to them?
No, I mean, my dad was in the Army Reserve, but I mean, he never pushed any of us to do anything. You know, I grew up in that era where, you know, college was pushed, that like you go to college, you're not going to be a success in life unless you have a college degree. And, you know, which, you know, coming up in that era, now I'm very much more on the other side of, you know, college doesn't make you, you know, they pushed college and paid for college, but college to me was somewhere to go and hang out with my friends and party. It wasn't you know, it wasn't really you know, I'm going to get a degree. I goofed off and, you know, pissed away. Sorry if I can't use that language, but the that opportunity. And, you know, I ended up getting my bachelor's at, I think I was 40 when I got my bachelor's, 44 I got my master's. So later in life, as my career progressed and I wanted to promote, education became more important. I've always been a big proponent of education, just not really necessarily the whole formal education of, you know, you've got to go to a class and you've got to sit here and listen to this person lecture you for, you know, I've always been a reader. I've been a voracious reader my whole life. And that's something, you know, I got from my dad. My dad always had a book and was always reading. So even to this day, I generally read 2 to 3 books a month. So that's always been something. So for me, like, education was more of a, you know, and even when I was going to school and getting my bachelor and master's, it was the going to class part was the, okay, well, I've got to do this. But it wasn't the, you know, not really much learning went on other than what you know, a lot of it I'd already known. You know, my bachelor's is in criminal justice. My master's is in public affairs, public leadership, public management's the emphasis. So it's stuff that I was doing in my career. So a lot of the stuff that was I already had the knowledge through practical experience. So it wasn't so much that I was learning much reading a lot of these books, because a lot of them either went along with what I already thought or were contradictory to my opinions. I mean, it made for good essays and good writing, but other than that, so service-wise, it was just from the time I was a kid, I always wanted to be a cop.
Really?
It was just it was just one of those things.
What do you
that I
think
always
the
wanted
drive
to do.
was? What was behind it?
I have no idea.
Justice?
I don't. Maybe just growing up and seeing cops and like the larger than life and you know the Saturday Evening Post you know, pictures that my mom had and you know, those magazine covers with the cops sitting with the little kid in the diner and just that, you know, kind of larger than life persona of the police officer being there to help people. And you know, I think maybe subconsciously that appealed to me just from the time I was a little boy. I wanted to be a cop.
So it just kind of led you all in that direction. No, I wanted to touch base more about the work ethic thing, because I think that's a big deal. And you know, you brought that up initially when you're talking about your family and your father and all that, and how that's, you know, what you're seeing now with that. You raised your child with that, and now you're raising your granddaughter. I mean, what do you think about this generation with that?
For the most part, I don't think we have parents anymore teaching kids financial literacy. We're not teaching it in schools. You know, when I went to high school, home ec, we learned how to balance a checkbook. You know, we sat in class with checkbooks and learned how to balance them. And there was some form of financial literacy taught. And now with, you know, commercials and TV and social media, and it's hey, if you want this, just finance it. You know, hey, you can't afford that car, don't worry about it. You can finance it. You know, and those things have happened for years. You know, they've got car dealerships outside of military bases that, you know, are selling a Ford Mustang to the soldier coming off base at a 30% interest rate. You know, and you know, you've got these young kids who don't know any better, that you know, they marry the stripper and they buy the sports car from the place with the 30% interest rate. And because we're not teaching kids that, hey, this is real life. That's loan's going to come due. And if you don't pay it, they're going to come take that stuff back. And so, you know, for a lot of it, and I've kind of had these conversations with my dad, and every generation wants their kids to do better than them and have more than they had. So it's at a certain point, have we handicapped our own children by making life too easy for them? I think we bear some of the responsibility for that because, my parents coming up, post growing up at the end of the Depression, and then, my dad got a job in aerospace, moved to California, worked for, in the aerospace industry from the time he was 19 till the time he was 79. He retired at 79. So 60 years. And,
That's when people stayed in one job their whole life, right?
Right. Well, and him and my mom have been married 64 years. So, same thing.
Goodness, wow.
And it's like, like my dad said, love's a decision. You make a decision, you made a commitment, you live by your commitment. Yeah. And trust me, they've had their ups and downs.
Yeah.
But, here they are. My dad's 87, my mom's 85, and he's her caretaker now and taking care of her. And, and it was just a different era. Yeah. But, growing up, my parents wanted us to have more than they had. Yeah. So, we did ski trips and we did, a lot of different stuff. And then, my wife grew up, her mom, basically was on welfare her whole life, raised 4 kids. Her husband left when Jamie was 2. So Jamie's mom was saddled with 4 kids and no job because she was a homemaker. Yeah. So, Jamie grew up extremely poor. Yeah. And, and same thing. So as we're raising our kids, at Christmas time, it's like, Jamie hardly ever had anything. So it was, hey, do you think we've gotten the kids enough stuff? And over time, we developed like, okay, hey, we need to pull back. Because the next Christmas would come and there'd be stuff in their closets that hadn't been opened from the year before. And it's like, we probably went a little bit overboard. But I think every generation has done that. Yeah. So I think part of it is we've wanted to make things easier for our kids, but at the same time, we've kind of handicapped them with these expectations that the world, and when it comes to that, I don't think Jamie and I set our kids up for that because it was, hey, they saw the realities they saw the realities of life, and we may have been at times a little too open and honest about financial stuff and other stuff that, our youngest daughter tends to be a worrier about money, and it's like, is that from seeing us like, hey, where are we? We may have been a little open with the kid, but in the long run, the thing with parenting is you have no idea what you're doing.
You don't, you just do the best you can with
and we're
what
different parents with Orchid than we were with R4.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, if we had done what Orchid did, you would have lost your crap with us. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I probably would have. Yeah. I was a young cop with a big badge and a big ego, and I wasn't going to be wrong. Yeah. And, at 56, I'm a completely different person than I was at 26.
Well, what do you think is responsible for that? The biggest thing?
I think some of it's my job.
Yeah.
Being a cop for 30 years and seeing the things you see and the insight you get into the human condition.
But interestingly enough, it hasn't necessarily hardened you, I would say. If anything, it's the opposite.
No.
Or do you think it's hardened?
Well, I've done therapy on and off throughout my career. Yeah. And, and that's probably some of it. There's stuff that I have that has hardened me. And there were a lot of years there that I was probably very hard with our kids and very closed off. And as much as, like I've said, like having the woodworking and stuff as an outlet, that probably kept me from drinking or doing other self-destructive behaviors. But I wasn't present a lot of times when our kids were growing up because, the stuff I saw and the stuff that, I've handled, either personally or as a supervisor, probably over 1,000 fatal collisions. And a lot of those kids, kids ejected from cars, kids, and so there are things in my career that I've seen that, and that's the whole law enforcement and fire and paramedic and, emergency room nurses. And you see things that people shouldn't have to see on a daily basis. Yeah. And, and especially in law enforcement, fire is one thing. You go out, you handle the medical aid, you go back to the station and, sit in your Barca lounger and have coffee and chili. And,
Right.
all the fireman jokes. But, as a cop, no one's calling you because they're having a good day.
Yeah.
No one calls
Right.
911 and says, hey, just wanted to say, my kid won an award at school and I'm having a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
When they're calling you, it's because it's their
Yeah.
worst day.
Yeah.
And you've got to go out and be able to deal with that and mitigate it. And then, you're on to the next call.
Right.
So it's like, do you have time to process what you just went through?
Happened.
And a lot of times, you see this stuff on the news and people are like, oh, the cops are this and they're that. And it's like, maybe it's a little easier for me to step back and say, well, let's take that with a grain of salt, because what did he just come from?
Absolutely.
And there's been calls, there's where, oh, well, this officer was screaming and yelling at this teenager over something that was nothing. And it's like, well, then you read some of the backstory and it's, well, they had just come from a call of a baby drowning.
Right.
And they had done mouth to mouth and tried to resuscitate this baby and they were unable to.
Yeah.
And the baby passed away. And now they've got to get in their car and try and shove all that down and go handle this next call. And they get to the next call and it's a belligerent teenager that's saying, F you pig, I don't have to do what you say.
Right.
Well, just coming from that and dealing with that and that death and the trauma and the dealing with the wailing parent whose baby just died.
Right.
And now I'm going to come and deal with a 16-year-old belligerent telling me to F off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people may lose their cool.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's one of the things I always tried to teach all my guys was, communication above all else. Learn how to talk to people, learn how to treat people. You treat people like people until it's time to not treat them. Their actions dictate your response.
Yeah.
And, if they don't want to go along with the program, then we got to do what we got to do. But up until that point, I rarely fought in my career at all, just because I talk to people.
Yeah.
And if you talk to people and you treat them like people,
have to.
you don't have to. There's going to be people that have mental illness or they have drugs on board and they're mentally altered because of medications or narcotics or whatever that aren't going to hear reason.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to do what you got to do at that point. But generally, if you treat people like people, you don't have to fight people.
Yeah.
I've talked 6'5", 300-pound parolees into handcuffs just by being cool.
Yeah.
Look, hey man, this isn't about you and me. This is, you did this. You weren't supposed to do it. Now there's a consequence, right? Yeah, you're right, Deb.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And there's those guys that go out always looking for a fight. The cops with the chip on the shoulder and the ego and we had a guy I worked with that every day he was in a fight.
Wow.
And his career ended early because, he got hurt
Yeah.
because he was always fighting
He
people.
was
And it's
doing
like,
something. Yeah.
so there's those sides of it. But, as a society, when it comes to law enforcement and the way people view it, it's like, give people a little grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you were saying in comparison to what you were saying earlier about, you have all that stuff from your phone bombarding you all day long about, negativity, hate, and anger, and all these things. Yet you're in law enforcement, and that just kind of comes natural with the job, doesn't it? I mean, how do you navigate that on a day-to-day basis and not have it destroy you?
I think at the end of the day, it's gotten a little better, but for years, and for me coming into law enforcement, you didn't talk. You didn't talk to therapists. You didn't.
No.
You're weak. And you've got most cops are type A personalities. A lot of the classes that I took when I was doing teaching stuff, like everyone's the hands-on learner. Very few cops are auditory learners, or they're all like type A hands-on learners. Where me, for whatever reason, I was kind of like even across the board, like all of the different disciplines. So, and I don't think I'm a full type A personality. I've got more of the esoteric kind of stuff to me. But a lot of cops, that's always been the way. It's, you don't talk to people. If you talk, you're weak.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that stigma, has to be done away with, because if you don't, there's only so long you can stuff shit into that bag.
Yeah.
And that 5-pound bag that, by the end of a career has 9,000 pounds of shit stuffed into it. At some point, the bag's going to burst. And that's the podcast I referenced earlier. Andy Stumpf was a SEAL, and like he has a saying that when you touch war, war touches you back.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much, and even he says when he talks about law enforcement, he says, yeah, we're deployed, but we're deployed for this amount of time, and then we come home and, we're training or doing whatever, but we're not exposed to it.
Yeah.
Cops for 30 years,
Yes.
day in, day out,
Yes.
40 hours a week, and if you're working overtime more than that, you're dealing with this thing nonstop over a 30-year career every day.
Yeah.
So, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
When you go out into society and I don't know that war is the proper word, but when you touch darkness, darkness touches you back.
Yeah.
When you look into the abyss looks back.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do with that?
Right.
And, and some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to drugs, some people turn to just become angry, bitter. There's a lot of retired, angry, bitter cops.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so it's how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Yeah. And departments are doing a better job of offering peer support groups. And, I know the Sheriff's Department, where I retired from, San Bernardino County, now has a peer support office at headquarters.
Yeah.
And, are doing there's more outreach stuff. When there's critical incidences, there's more, hey, we're going to do a debrief. We'll have the counseling team come out and do a debrief. But it's still, even with those things offered, it's still getting through to the officers that, hey, if you show up at that and your buddy's at it,
right.
that whole, well, I don't want to show up and have people see me there and think that I'm weak. And so it's, it's trying to battle that stereotype that seeking therapy and talking to a counselor is somehow, a weakness.
Yeah.
And then you get the guys that are, okay, well, I'm willing to do it, but that therapist wasn't a cop. They don't know what I'm going through.
They don't understand.
They don't understand.
That's a really good point.
And that's one of the things, Andy talks about in his podcast is that military guys do that a lot too.
Yeah.
That, they weren't deployed. They don't know. And like his take on that is, yeah, you're right. They're not an expert in war.
Yeah.
But they're an expert in the brain and how the brain works and how the brain processes things.
Yeah.
And whether or not they've seen combat, they know what your brain is doing.
Yeah.
So the point is to talk to someone who's an expert in the brain to work through this stuff. It doesn't matter whether they share your experiences. Yeah, if they happen to have been in the military and can bond with you maybe over some of those things, maybe that's helpful. But it doesn't necessarily mean that someone can't help you because they don't have a shared experience.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the disconnect a lot of people get is, well, they don't know what I've been through, so they can't talk to me and understand me and help me work through it. And sometimes it's just you talking it out, having someone to talk to and
right.
And get that stuff out. And I wasn't always good at that. And I'm still not great at it,
What was the turning point for that? I mean, if you grew up with that stigma and it was, deeply embedded, how did you ever take the first step to go to therapy?
I think probably wanting to keep my marriage.
So the relationship
stuff. And to this day, it persists. I mean, there's still, and it's weird because it's different with my wife than it is with other people.
Yeah.
With her, at times I can have a very short fuse and I respond emotionally.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. It's still something that I'm trying to work through. That's a constant thing there. And
I think that's common though with our loved ones.
Probably.
Probably
because you feel
safety,
you feel
right?
safe with them. And
there's a safety, right?
But they're also the ones that we shouldn't be that way with,
right?
Because it's the most unfair to them.
Absolutely.
That maybe you feel safe in that environment to react like that, but that's trying to get better. But it's it's a constant battle. And there's we've had issues throughout. She was a dispatcher for a lot of years, so she understands a lot of the things that I've seen and the things that and it's taken kind of a realization, and it was probably just this year in therapy that I kind of had this realization that it was probably 15 or 16 years ago I responded to a call of Baby not breathing. Showed up to the call, and guy hands me the baby, and she's not breathing.
Yikes.
And I look down, and the baby's just bruised head to toe.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
Post-mortem lividity already set in.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, there's nothing I'm gonna
Yeah.
do with this child. And fire responds and take the diaper off the baby, and you can see bruising on the inner thighs where it just looked like someone had just been kicking the baby like a. And come to find out, the guy had basically, the baby was crying, wouldn't stop. He had stuffed it under a couch cushion and slept on top of it. And it was kind of in therapy more recently, it's kind of been like, that was kind of like a point where really seeing, I mean, I had seen death before and a lot of times, and it had just never sunk in and registered with me to the level it did that day. And it was kind of that day that I just kind of shut down. And it was like, if this is the depravity of man, what's the point?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
And I think I became a colder, less caring person when that happened.
From that experience.
From that experience. And, and then, I was the first responder on the December 2nd terrorist attack at IRC.
Yes.
And, and being there and seeing, again, just the depravity of man and, over what? Because they were celebrating Christmas and you believe in a different ideology. And then,
how do you even manage and contain all that stuff? You're trying to save lives. You're trying to keep from dying yourself. And at the same time, I can't imagine what must go on in your mind.
You just block it out.
You just act.
Yeah. You just...
And then
at that point, there's no conscious... I don't know that there's critical thought, but it's more, I think, at a base level that, it's that you revert to your training.
Yeah.
So it's like, you hear these people that, well, I don't train, but when the time comes, I'm going to see red and it's go time. And it's like, no, you fall to the level of your training.
Yeah.
So it's, if you have trained and you've done the things you're going to do, you revert back to that.
Right.
Because that's your base level of training and experience, and you revert back to that. And yeah, you're still critically thinking, but now you're in the mindset of, this is what I've got to do.
Yeah.
And it's the fight, flight, or freeze. There's people that are just going to freeze and, and they're in a corner sitting there with their thumb in their mouth. And, or there's, fuck this, I'm out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
And they turn and, and I've had some partners in critical incidents that have turned and run out of the house.
Yeah.
Or, you do what you've been trained and programmed to do, and this is what I've trained, this is what I know, and I fall back to my training, and you get through it.
Yeah.
But it's the after that,
sitting with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the end of the night.
Yeah.
When it comes back to haunt.
Yeah.
I mean, just even sitting there with the image that you presented a minute ago, you can't let go of that. How do you ever let go of that without having some meaning to it, I guess?
Well, and that's when I've talked to classes of students, it's like, there's going to be things in your career that you're not going to let go of, that will stick with you forever. I can still close my eyes and see every bruise on that baby, and, and there's about three things that there's the terrorist attack, and then Christopher Dorner, the LAPD officer that went rogue up in Big Bear.
Big Bear, yeah.
So when Jeremiah McKay was killed, our detective that was killed, was a friend of mine. I was about 3 minutes away when the officer down call went out. So then you've got the second guessing of, if I was a little faster, could I have prevented it? Which you never know. I could have been shot and killed too, or my other partners that were with me that were almost there. You can't second guess. But there's always that.
Guilt.
Yeah, there's always that. What if I'd been a little quicker? What if we had found him sooner? So there's those things. I've had several friends commit suicide that just couldn't deal with
overwhelming.
That couldn't bear that weight anymore. And I'm not going to say there hasn't been a couple times I've sat in the closet with a gun in my lap and thought, would everyone be better off without me? Would it be, could I just take the pain away?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for me, it's and I've always kind of considered it a selfish decision.
Yeah.
That, yeah, you're ending the pain for you, but what pain are you creating
Yeah.
for your family?
Everybody else.
Do I want my wife or my granddaughter to walk into the closet?
Right.
And, you know, because I've responded to calls and
Yeah.
where, you know, families have walked in where dad stuck the shotgun under his chin, and they walk in and his brain matter's all over the ceiling, and it's like, is that what you want to put your family through?
Yeah.
So, you know, the better part of whatever has kicked in. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and say that I've never been in that spot, because I have.
Yeah.
And, you know, my family and burdening with them with that is kind of what got me through, like, okay, suck it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think part of what our 4 kids see now is, you know, I'm different with Orchid than I was with them.
Yeah.
Our daughter Stephanie, that is the musical theater major, you know,
Yeah.
she moved to New York for a year to try and do Broadway.
Oh, wow.
But with what New York costs, you know, she was
Yeah.
having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay rent for her apartment. How do you go
Wow.
audition for
Yeah.
things when,
Yeah.
you know, when she ended up coming home and felt like a failure? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, 99% of your classmates and friends wouldn't have moved to New York and even tried.
Yes.
You know, it's not a failure.
Yeah. It's the
It's,
experience.
you know, it's
Yeah.
what do you do with that experience now?
Yeah.
You know, did that help you? You know, I know there's people that have the whole burn the ships, like, you know, if this is what I'm going to do, and, you know, once I land, I'm going to burn the ships, and this is all I'm going to try.
Yeah.
Well, there's also, you know, the whole sunken cost thing that,
Right.
like, okay, well, you've put 5 years into doing this, and you don't have a penny to show for it. Are you going to
Right.
keep doing it?
Right.
Or do you pivot and
Right.
say, okay, this hasn't worked, but this door's opened up, so I'm going to go this direction. It's still something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
So there, you know, there's a fine line there of, you know, just because you failed doesn't make you a failure. Because, you know, people say to me all the time, well, how'd you learn to do woodworking? How'd you
Yeah.
learn to do this? Well, I fucked a lot of shit up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've thrown away a lot of expensive pieces of wood that,
Yeah.
that I've screwed up.
Yeah.
But, you know, the first time I did, if I'd said, well,
Yeah.
I'm a failure,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a woodworker
I'm not
because I
gonna
can't do
it.
this.
Yeah.
You know, how does that follow you through life?
Yeah.
If every time something gets hard and you
Yeah.
make a mistake, you give
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where we get these people that are in their 40s living in their mom's basement, you know,
Mm-hmm.
blaming their parents and society for everything that's happened. It's like,
Yeah.
well, at the end of the day, this is on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have had some obstacles in front of you, but how'd you deal with them?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
decisions did you make to deal with those
get
obstacles?
to,
Did
yeah.
you say, you know what, I'm sick of living like this, and
Yeah.
I'm going to make a choice to, you know, there's another podcast I listen to, the Jocko podcast, another SEAL guy, but, you know, they call mistakes tuition payments. Because they started
Yeah.
Origin USA as like their own apparel company. And
Yeah.
they found like a loom in an original like weaving loom in some torn down factory in Maine,
Oh, wow.
and ended up finding a guy that knew how it had worked, and he helped
Yeah.
them rebuild it. And now
Oh,
they're
wow.
making apparel in America with all American sourced stuff. But like he said, he goes, it hasn't been easy. We've made
Yeah.
a ton of mistakes
Yeah.
and lost a ton of money,
Yeah.
but they call them tuition payments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like,
That's
it's not
really
a failure,
cool.
it's
Yeah.
a tuition payment.
I like that.
You've
Yeah.
got to make these mistakes in
Yes.
order to learn.
Yeah.
It's the only way we get better if you never make mistakes. And that's, you know, I tried to pass that on to my subordinates when I was a sergeant. It's like, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not trying.
Right.
You're not going out there and trying to do anything new or anything
Yeah.
innovative. You're just going through the motions and checking the boxes. And I
Right.
expect you to fail.
Right.
It's when you fail, what do you do with it?
Yes.
Do you try and hide it? Do you try and cover it up? Or do you
Yes.
say, hey, Sarge, I screwed this up,
Yeah.
but here's what I learned from it, and here's what I'm going to do going forward. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's a training experience.
Yeah.
You know, and when a boss comes down and says, hey, he did this, did you punish him?
Yeah.
Well, no, he made a mistake. He copped to it. He owned it.
Yep.
And this is what he's doing now.
Yep.
So, no, that was a training experience,
Yep.
and he learned what he needed to learn from
And
it.
there's respect in that.
And if it's repeated,
Yeah.
then we'll have a different conversation.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not a ollie ollie oxen free,
Yeah.
but, you know, if someone realizes they made a mistake and they make changes to improve,
To correct.
then why are we going to punish them? Why are
Yeah.
we going to discipline them?
Yeah.
There are things that may be so egregious that we have to, but if it's a simple training issue or
Yeah.
a mistake, you know, people say there's a difference between a mistake of the head and a mistake of the heart. Did you know what you were doing is wrong and you did it anyway?
Yeah.
Or did you have good intentions in mind and you screwed up?
Yeah.
Those are two totally polar opposites.
Yeah.
You know, if you went into something knowing that you were doing wrong,
Yeah.
okay, that's a different conversation
Yeah.
than, you know, your heart was in the right place, but you screwed
Right.
up.
Right.
Okay, we'll deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, own it. You know, that's one thing. You know, integrity is huge.
Yeah.
Is-
Well, I go back to the image you presented at the beginning about the bent nails.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because that, you know, it is. It's about, you know, it's there
Right.
and you have to live with it. So it's not, you're not hiding anything from anybody
Right.
by not doing these things or by doing them and pretending they're not, you know, you didn't do them. You know it's there, and that's how we build the integrity, right?
Well, and it's really, and that was the lesson that stuck with me from that was the,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't the that I had to redo the work. It was that you know, you're going to know that it's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Every time you walk past there in the future, as you grow up,
Yeah.
you're going to know that you didn't do your best.
Yeah. And it builds up.
And
It
do you want to
builds up.
live with knowing that you didn't
Right.
do your best?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
And when you don't, trust me, you you live with it.
Yeah.
You know that you didn't do your best, and you know. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
So when did you start the woodworking? What was that a result of?
Well, I grew up, you know, like I said, I grew up with a dad who did everything. So I grew
Yeah.
up, you know, kind of in the trades and, you
Uh-huh.
know, framed houses. I hung drywall for
Oh,
a day
okay.
and went,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
not for me.
Yeah.
But, you know, I grew up, you know, things broke, you fixed them. So I always kind of grew up kind of handy. But about 4 years into my law enforcement career, I transferred departments. I went to Rialto PD.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys that I worked with, his grandfather had given him a bunch of tools, woodworking tools, and you know, I was hanging out with him all the time, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come over and we'll build something?" And
Yeah.
so I kind of started just woodworking with him, and it kind of just grew from there and kind of became an outlet
Yeah.
from the law enforcement career and the seeing shit all day. It's like come home, spend a little time in the shop, and you know, be able to kind of wind down and get my thoughts off of work. And because when you're trying to focus and
Yeah.
build something, you're focusing on that
Right.
specific task at hand.
Yeah.
And the other shits, you know, what kind of thoughts do they call them? Intrusive thoughts.
Yes. Yes.
aren't coming in because you're
Yes.
focusing on this thing in front of you. And
Yeah.
then one day, one of my buddies said, "Hey, I know you do woodworking. You think you could build kitchen cabinets for me?" And I was like, "Well, shit, they're just boxes with doors.
Wow.
Fuck it, yeah, why not?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did his kitchen, and then word of mouth just kind of spread, and it just kind of went from there. And then I had injured myself at work and was very disillusioned with my law enforcement career. And by that point, we were doing cabinets pretty much, you know, nonstop.
Yeah.
And with the stuff going on with the, you know, the agency, there was a lot of corruption stuff going on with the agency I was working with. And they showed up one day and said, "Hey, either you're back at work Monday or we're going to start termination proceedings for insubordination." And I was like, "Well, I have a
Wow.
note from my doctor that put me off work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't care what your doctor said. You either come back or..."
Really?
There was a lot of shady stuff going on. And I just told Jamie, I said, "I'm done with this."
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like so bitter and whatever that I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I was like, "Hey, I think I just want to build cabinets full time, and we'll just
Wow.
make a full-time
So it's
cabinet
really
business."
been
And
a career now.
so that next day, I faxed in my resignation to the chief's
Wow.
office, and
Yeah.
and you know, Jamie was still dispatching, so we still had insurance through her
Yeah.
and stuff. And then the business actually was doing really well, so the next year she actually resigned
That's wonderful.
from dispatch, and we were running that full time. And then I started missing law enforcement.
Really?
Being out of it, you know, but still having friends in it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I started actually missing the job and missing, I don't know, maybe the adrenaline rush and the,
Yeah.
the whatever
Yeah.
it may be. So I had a friend who actually is one of my best friends that committed suicide. He was, at the time, was one of the background guys for the sheriff's department. And he had seen my application, and we had met in passing, but I didn't really know him real well. But he knew my background and history and training
Yeah.
and expertise. And so he called and said, "Hey, fucker, And that's how he always was. He's like, yeah, I've got your application. You need to like come in and get this stuff done.
Yeah.
And so I did, and as luck would have it, that's right when so I got hired July 2007, and 2008's when the housing market tanked.
Wow.
And all of the builders that we were doing cabinet work for all went under. So it was like the cabinet work dried up, and it was like,
Yes.
okay, well maybe someone was looking
Yeah.
looking out for us, because that
Interesting.
kind of worked out.
Yeah.
And that allowed Jamie to stay home still, and raise the kids, because that was kind of her motivation of leaving the sheriff's department, was the business is doing good. She can help me
Yeah.
run the business, and then she can be home,
Yeah.
with the kids,
Yeah.
and be that mom that's present in the
Yeah.
home, and
Yeah.
that solid base,
Yeah.
because she really is the rock and foundation of our house and everything that's
awesome.
gone on. And I've probably taken advantage of that for way too long and didn't appreciate that enough. But she was always that, she was always there.
Yeah.
She was the Rock of Gibraltar, and
Yeah.
and to this day she'll say, yeah, I was, but who's filling my cup? Everyone else was always emptying my cup.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's another thing to work through.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and be able to admit and say, yeah, she's taken the brunt of the waves
Yeah.
hitting her for a lot of years.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I went back to the sheriff's department and made a career of that, and still did
Wow.
woodworking on the side here
Uh-huh.
and there, and stuff, and took side jobs here and there, because almost every cop and fireman has a side
Yeah.
hustle. Especially the sheriff's department, we went to 312s.
Yeah.
So you're working 3 days a week, you have
Yeah.
4 days off, and it's like, so everyone's got a side
That's
hustle.
something
so
else. Yeah. Yeah.
so kept that going, and that's just kind of
That's terrific.
morphed into my retirement gig now. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it sounds like, from what what I'm hearing through the history of all this, what you've built is a sense of gratefulness for everything.
Yeah, I think it's taken a lot of years to get to that point where it's
Yeah.
again, it might be a trite statement to say that you're a sum of your experiences, but I think you really are.
Yeah.
And I think to really appreciate where I am now and what I have takes looking back at kind of the storms that you've been through, and wow, it's been a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we've and you look back, and and I have people say, well, you grew up in Orange County, upper middle class family, you never wanted for anything, and it's like, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
But even a lot of the most messed up people I know are people who grew up with everything.
Yeah.
And had everything,
Yeah, it
and
doesn't matter.
never wanted for anything.
Yeah.
And that comes with its own whole host of
Yeah.
problems. I think probably one of the things that it's made me most grateful for is time, because it's like time's that one thing you can't get back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
are there decisions that we've made in our past that we think probably could have done that differently? To a certain extent, yeah. But then the other side of that is, if you give up that, if you go back and change one thing in your past, you change everything.
Yeah. Right.
One decision,
Right.
one decision, and everything that blossomed from that, it's that whole butterfly effect
Yeah,
thing. But,
right.
Every decision that comes forward from that changes.
Yeah.
And you end up in a totally different place, totally different person.
Yeah.
So, you really are a sum of those experiences and the decisions you've made. And did some of those, what may have seemed like bad decisions at the time, end up being positive in the end? It's hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I think when you look back and kind of talk over, who you are and where you've come from, the things you've been through, gives you appreciation for where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
and who you are as a person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, I've lived a blessed life.
Yeah.
Haven't had any super major medical, I'm broken from being a cop for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had a shoulder replacement. They just approved the other shoulder to be done.
Yeah.
2 herniated discs in the back,
Oh
no
my
cartilage in my
goodness.
knees. So, high blood pressure. The job takes its toll on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there's no doubt about climbing in and out of a patrol car for 30 years with a
Yeah.
30-pound gun belt on.
Yeah.
Doesn't take its toll on your
I'm
body.
sure.
And, a lot of years in SWAT, narcotics, all of the different things that I've done, it takes a toll.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, what do you do with it?
Yeah. But
And for me, it was like, and kind of the woodworking thing for me is kind of a lot of guys retire and can't let go of it because being a cop has become who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I never did, was it never became my identity.
Yeah.
It was what I did. It wasn't who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially when you see a lot of cops in some of these videos overplaying their authority and stuff, it's because that has become their identity.
They're who they are.
And when it's your identity being challenged,
Yeah.
it's not the badge and the uniform being challenged now. It's I've internalized this to it's who I've become. So now you're challenging me, as opposed to the uniform.
The law.
It's
Yeah.
the image they're challenging, not me as a person.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's also part of the,
That's a really
my ability
interesting-
to deal with people and communicate with
Yeah.
people. Because really everything in life's about building relationships.
Yeah.
Whether it be leadership, a cop to a suspect, cop to a victim. It's
Right.
about building relationships and allowing
Right.
people that they're going to trust you enough
Right.
to talk to you.
Well, to be human
Right.
with each other.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
really that humanizing factor
Yeah.
of, so it's, for me, it never became my identity.
Yeah.
It was never who I was. It's
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah.
So retiring, it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to build furniture and I'm going to
Yeah.
do this but so many either go to work at another police agency, or they go into private security, or they go into investigations, private investigations.
Right.
Because it's all they know,
all
and it's
they-
who they are.
That's who
It's
they
not,
become.
and then there's a lot of guys I know that have retired and been super successful in just retiring. And again, it's about not allowing this job to become your identity.
Yeah.
And I think that's the downfall of a lot of people, and not just in law enforcement. I think in any field, if you allow what you do to become who you are, I think you severely handicap yourself.
Yeah.
Because now it's not, I'm James Snow.
Yeah.
It's I'm James Snow, the cop.
Yeah.
And everything I look at is through the lens of a cop.
Through that. Yeah.
So it's, I think that can be a danger.
Well, I think the gift of what you carry now, maybe through experience or whatever, or just because of who you are, is this consciousness, this huge consciousness about all these things. It's not
I
like,
hope.
it's not like you're blind to anything. It's that maybe you're struggling with things, but because you have that consciousness, you're able to at least look at them or invite them in and kind of like, all right, well, I got that going on and I got this going on. And I think just the mere fact that you have that gift, it changes you as a person. It makes you a better person.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I said it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
It's still a challenge. But I think part of that is just the human experience.
Yeah, but you have the willingness to look at it and take it on. And I think that's what everybody's challenge is, right? Are we willing to look at those things that are, or take responsibility for those things that ours,
Right.
What are we accountable for? And that it's okay to be accountable for those things, instead of, cutting them off and pushing them away and that's not me, I'm not this, and all those things. You actually embody them and say, all right, well, I got this. It's I don't know what the hell to do with it, but I've got it, and I'm gonna look at it, and then you play with it and you see what it turns into.
Right.
And I think just the ability to do that is your strength that makes you better in the world.
Like I said, I hope.
Yeah.
I think my challenge is now admitting that in front of my wife instead of in a podcast studio in front of you. So it's saying, I mean, and some of that is still ego and the letting go of your ego to be able to say, and it should be, if I can't let that ego down in front of my partner.
Yeah.
Well,
who
should I be able to
absolutely.
let it down in front of? But
well,
there's still that
we all have
protectionist.
we all have a sense of that. I think we all have because we fear like being vulnerable in that is somehow going to take away something from us, that vulnerable. But actually, when you have the act of doing it, you realize how much stronger and bonded you are to the person than ever before, and that you feel this inner strength that comes like, it's not gonna break me down. Actually, that's it uplifts you, and but it takes a lot of practice because the initial feeling is so overwhelming of vulnerability.
Right.
Like, if I say that, then oh my God, what am I opening myself up to? Right.
Right.
What's next? But really, that person you give them such a huge gift when you say those things to them, and they look at you with such a respect, I think, in such a different way, that it only builds from there.
Well, I think some of that too is trying to overcome, I would say, kind of the way I was raised in my parents' dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, and because my dad was very much I'm not going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like if you want to yell
Yeah.
and rage and whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. So there was kind of that
Yeah.
passive aggressive, you know, and I don't even know if it's passive aggressive, but that's what Jamie has said it is. But my mom is very domineering and very outspoken, and my dad was the quiet one, and so, you know, and that's kind of the tact I took with my ex-wife, was like, you know, when going through the divorce and then even raising our kids, and then, you know, Jamie's in that dynamic too, and it's you know, well, why don't you tell Diane this? Why don't you tell your ex this? And this, and it's like, because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
She doesn't hear it. She's a narcissist. She doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
she's not gonna care.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, and then there's okay, well, if I do say it, then is it gonna make Jamie happy? But so it's do I do it just because I think it's gonna appease someone?
Yeah.
But then, you know, it's just that dynamic that I grew up learning how my dad dealt with my mom. So it's that
That's all
trying to overcome that,
Yeah.
that in a healthy manner, that,
Yeah.
you know, okay, yeah, I can open up and whatever, but, you know, my problem has always been, then it becomes emotional and I get emotionally charged, and I get emotionally hijacked, and it's like, you know, and Jamie's thinks, why do you just get emotionally hijacked with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, well, because I care about you. And she's like, well, if you care about me, you shouldn't get, you know, that way. And it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Well, that's the thing. We don't have the tools. If we've never saw examples of how to do things, how do we know? And how do we know what the outcome's going to be? And it just, you know, so I think, and there's nothing like couples work to make you realize that, you know, that each person's coming from their own, you know, background dynamic, and putting the two together, you know, it can be really difficult.
Well, that's one of the funny things when you hear people will say like, oh, they have such a great relationship and this and that. And it's like, well, you're not behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been to a lot of houses as a cop on domestic disputes where these were allegedly couples that all of their friends thought they were the greatest couples in the world. And, you know, she stabs them in the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, and it's just, communication is such a hard thing.
It is.
And, you know, and I don't know why it's so much harder with your spouse than it is with, you know, like
because
everyone
that's
else.
With who you're going to be most vulnerable, right?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, she's put up with me for almost 25 years at this point. So.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
you're doing something right. Both of you.
Well,
right?
She's a patient woman.
Yeah.
So.
Terrific person. Well, I thank you. This has been great, and I've learned a lot, and
it's my pleasure.
I appreciate
Glad
you being
that I could come in and sit down with you and have a chat.
It was terrific. You've been listening to Who Cares with Dr. Wendy Selevitch. If this episode gave you something to think about, please like, comment, subscribe, and talk about it with someone you care about, because the people who care for others need care too. We'll see you next time.